why we have been able to build this collaboration. This year, the year of 2024, is a very significant year for India. We are celebrating the 75th anniversary of the adoption of the Constitution of India. On 26 November 1949, the Constitution of India was adopted. It was an extraordinary effort that lasted more than 2.5 years, and approximately finally 300 members of the Constitutional Assembly adopted the Constitution. Now, the last 75 years has been quite an extraordinary journey, and so we at OPT Global University felt that it's an appropriate time for us to establish India's first Constitution Museum and the Rights and Freedoms Academy. Now, this is quite interesting because we discovered that India does not have so far a Constitution Museum and a Rights and Freedoms Academy of the kind that the United States has in the form of the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia. We recognize that this is a very important opportunity, a historic opportunity, a historic occasion when we can do this. So we embarked on the journey as late as June of this year to establish India's first Constitution Museum. I'm happy to report to you that the last 6 months have been quite an intense effort that involved so many institutions in India and around the world in terms of collection of data, archival information, and both physical and digital information and all of that. I will be sharing with you more information about that as well. But let me talk to you about the objectives of the Constitution Museum. There were 5 important objectives of the Constitution Museum. First, the vision and the purpose of establishing the Constitution Museum essentially was to promote civic education among ordinary people of India. It does not matter whether they are a lawyer or a judge. We want to invest in ideas of civic education, in citizenship, so that people understand and appreciate the history and evolution of the Constitution. The second objective of establishing the Constitution Museum is to democratize the access to Constitution. In some ways, Constitution was historically seen as a document that was confined to the interests of lawyers and judges, that was confined to the interests of law, but we wanted to democratize access to the Constitution, and hence the museum becomes an opportunity for people to understand complex notions of law and Constitution in an easily understandable manner. So there are several installations in the museum which include sculptures and paintings and art forms and a lot of paneling. All those things are essentially put with a view to ensuring that ordinary people are able to connect to the museum. The third objective of the Constitution Museum is to essentially pay tribute to the outstanding 300 members of the Constituent Assembly. I am sure several of us know that some of the leading figures were part of the Constituent Assembly. Dr. Rajendra Prasad was the President of the Constituent Assembly. Pandit Nehru moved the objectives resolution which became the preamble. Sardar Patel played a very significant role in the Constituent Assembly and later became India's first Deputy Prime Minister. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constituent Assembly and hugely credited with the Constitution itself, and later became India's first Prime Minister. And you can add a few more names, including Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad and K.M. Munshi and so many others. But that will give you 10, 15 people or so. But there are 300 members. So for the first time in the history of post-independent India, we have paid tribute to all the 300 members of the Constituent Assembly, and the museum essentially protects and celebrates their legacy and contribution, and that is the third objective of the museum. The fourth objective of the museum is essentially to promote civic discourse surrounding ideas of democracy, rule of law, and the way in which our evolution has transformed the society. In some ways, we have used and we plan to use the museum as an opportunity for engagement, intellectually and otherwise, where the museum goers have an opportunity to be part of the academic institution itself. There is something quite significant about the fact that this museum has been built in a university space where ideas are constantly generated. And the last objective of the museum essentially is to recognize the 75 years of the history of the evolution of the Constitution and the rights and freedoms. After the Constitution was adopted on 26 November 1949, we have a rich tapestry of events, including the functioning of our democratic institutions, including the courts, the legislation, the parliament, the various debates, the various amendments to the Constitution. All of that is being recorded and presented in a manner that people can understand and appreciate the history as well. These are the 5 objectives on the basis of which we embarked on the journey of establishing India's first Constitution Museum. Another aspect of this whole effort is also to recognize that the Constitution is such a founding and a foundational document that everybody has a stake in it. And how do we bring that stakeholdership? The only way by which we can build the stakeholdership is to involve people in developing deeper understanding of the Constitution. Our Constitution was also very flexible. It was born out of the circumstances in which we were essentially coming out of nearly 200 years of colonialism. We were building a new India. And so these aspects were also brought into the museum as well. Now, this of course was all going in that direction. But early on, one of the things that we decided to do was, how do we make the museum interesting, both in terms of the participants and the visitors who come to the museum, but also how we can keep them engaged and involved in the entire museum experience. And so that thought process led to what we consider a very innovative idea, something quite unique and I believe pioneering in the country, which is to have India's first robotic tour guide for the Constitution Museum. Of course, we are a liberal arts and social sciences and humanities university with schools such as law and architecture. We don't have engineering and other such disciplines. So we thought that we should reach out to one of India's premier institutions focused in the field of engineering and technology, and that's how we reached out to the IIT Madras. I had a discussion initially with Dr. Venkatesh Balasubramaniam, after which we had an opportunity to host the team from IIT Madras. We had visited IIT Madras here, and our team had extensive discussions here, followed by their visit, and of course, there was a very interesting collaboration that happened there. So the OP Jindal Global University and IIT Madras have come together in this particular aspect of the museum, which is to have India's first robotic tour guide of the museum. Now, why this part of it is interesting? First of all, it's an example of institutional collaboration. IIT Madras is a premier public institution and is also an institution of eminence recognized by the Government of India. OP Jindal Global University is a private university, but also an institution of eminence recognized by the Government of India. But unlike IIT, it's a purely liberal arts, humanities, social sciences. Second, the idea that I talked earlier, Constitution is not confined to law. It's about every individual and every institution. The partnership that we have created with IIT Madras to launch the robot as a tour guide in the Constitution Museum is an example of transcending the limited engagement of Constitution with law and legal institutions, and to democratize the access to Constitution beyond the confines of law and legal institutions. This institutional collaboration between hoping it will go to University Madras, is an example of that. Third, we not only at a conceptual and at the institutional level collaborated, we ensure that the students are also collaborating with each other. The early aspects of the design was created by some of the students of the Tyndall School of Art and Architecture, as well as some of the liberal arts students who are pursuing the BFA program. They, in turn, connected with the IIT students who were obviously specialists and engineers and specializing in robotic technology, and their conversations, their meetings, their interactions created the foundation for the design of the robot, which you will shortly see, and ultimately led to this collaboration as well. The fourth aspect of this collaboration is also about recognizing that how we can use technology in an interesting and an impactful manner, even when you have a more traditional institution in the form of a museum. Museums seem to be very old traditional institutions, but we're also signaling another important aspect here, which is about tradition and modernity can go hand in hand, just like India, and how Indian civilization has embraced modernity through its encompassing technologies that have emerged over the years. And the last bit, what I want to say about this collaboration is that we strongly believe that if two institutions in the form of IIT and JGU can come together in creating this robot, there are many more opportunities for institutional collaborations to emerge between the study of humanities, social sciences, liberal arts, law, sciences, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine, and other such disciplines. It's an example of institutions coming out of pre-existing notions of inertia and reluctance to collaborate. This is an example of public-private partnership. It's an example of institutions coming out of the comfort zone to come out with something new and imaginative. We are very, very excited to be able to unveil the robot here in Chennai. With those words, I'm going to request Professor Venkatesh Balasubramaniam, distinguished professor at IIT Madras, to share his reflections on the robot and also the collaboration itself. Thank you.
So, Constitution is not merely a lawyer's document. It is the spirit of a vehicle that is there, that shall survive for the ages together. Also, similar to that was what Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's quote on Constitution was. It makes a lot of pleasure to collaborate with the JGU Global University on a very interesting endeavor of having a Constitution Museum. Generally, museum is looked down upon as a place that you go, but museum is a place to look up for various things that are there. So beautifully he had summarized the reason and the rationale of how the first Constitution Museum in independent India after 75 years is getting inaugurated at the Institute of Eminence, Tyndall University. Around here, he had formed a question of a technology collaboration or something that can be brought up. And in that endeavor is this collaborative approach. Like the Constitution was put by this baby country with a bunch of lawyers and an excellent members of the Constituent Assembly who got together, tried to put a framework of rules under which this nation could progress and reach where we are. Symbolic to that is this collaborative effort, not of professors or faculty and other things, but a bunch of students. People, as said before, from the JGU's School of Art and Architecture and Fine Arts, the BFA students and others, who came up with external design. And the technical part of it was from the IIT, the Center for Innovation at C5 at IIT Madras. We had our students had put together a various aspects like the large language model, bring the AI into it, and aspects of it that are new in terms of what can be done. Constitution again was not a perfect document from the day one, and that is something that is always improved and amended to be something of relevance and a guiding framework for all of us. Likewise, this logo is something that is being put together, probably evolving with the large language models and other things that are there, but also be a guide to a large body of people that are going to be viewing these evolution of this constitution through this technological aspect that could be there as a museum work. Now there are many firsts. I mean, friend Professor Paddy will talk about it more in detail. What I wanted to bring across are three essential points that we want to. Putting together a museum, it's easy to go buy a logo and put it in, but planting the seeds of understanding what this constitution is and what it means and how it can be going forward is by the next generation and how they go forward with that. So the endeavor is all about the students who can bring together the bunch of students from various disciplines at IIT Madras and a bunch of students from the arts and the finance and architecture and other things like JGU together work on this aspect. There is a display of the logo outside, and I'm sure some of you may get a chance to view physically or virtually once the museum gets inaugurated, and you should appreciate, and we should have many more such museums across the country to celebrate the Constitution, but the first one gets done after 75 years.
All right. I want to say that may I request you to welcome Sambit, the India's first tour guide robot to be present at the Constitution Museum. We are introducing Sambit. We have named the robot as Sambit, which is the kind of short form of the word Samvidhan, which is the Constitution.
The hero of it is Samrit, and the bigger hero and heroine are the kids who work now to get it done in very short period.
This is actually India's first tour guide robot, that is actually built to assist people, give them tours, and it was not easy, because whenever you go to a museum, there will be many exhibits, right? It's not that people are going to go see one photo or one video or one picture or one art or one mural or one activity. It is going to be multiple activities. So it is very easy for a human being to go stand there and explain what these activities are. But if you have to conceive this to be done through a bot, it is not easy, because you have to not only feed the required information to the bot, but also empower the bot to have information that it can actually interface with the real world, sometimes the internet, and get extra information, because human beings can ask any question, right? So it was very, very challenging. So as far as the exhibits, the research, the information, I think we have to congratulate the students, who thought through this, because when a human being is giving a tour, it's very easy. You talk about this, whatever you know, you can say and get out. But how do you make a robot actually, give a tour about this exhibit was a very, very challenging thing. So So first tick is, we have conceptualized India's first tour-guide robot, and this is going to be the start. This is just going to be the beginning, because I strongly feel that in years to come, these spaces can be occupied by robots, and they might even do a better job in terms of giving guide or not discriminating between people. You know, what human beings do is, we have an interested person, we have a very stalwart, we may spend more time, but robot will not make that distinction or discrimination. So that is why robot coming into these spaces is going to be more meaningful and more creative for the future. The second is, it's very, very interesting. You know, when you create a robot outside India, you normally are testing the robot on one language key. But India is very diversified. You have people coming from different parts of the country, and they may want to ask the board to prepare itself in multiple languages. That is a very, very difficult challenge. One is content to be prepared in English, and also content to be prepared in multiple languages. So I'm very happy to report that in the first phase, this bot is going to be multilingual, both Hindi and English. It can speak, it can take guide, it can guide the visitor on these two languages. I think that's another very interesting point that I wanted to mention. And the last point I will mention, and I will pass it on to Anju for Q&A, is there are three unique things about this bot, you know, in terms of technology. The user interface technology that was developed for this bot was not taken from any other existing bot. It was done specifically for this bot to achieve multilingual or multi-language speaking abilities. The second thing I would want to say is, you know, outside India there have been experiments as far as the tour guide robots are considered. But in India, this is the first experimentation of this kind. You know, in multi-language field, and to make sure that the museum is able to give the complete tour is unimaginable, right? And the last one, technologically, I also want to add is everything that we have sourced, we won by the students, and it is absolutely designed, implemented, executed by the students, and there cannot be a better incubation environment which gets created where students are championing this. You know, so this is a bot made by the students for the museum, and you know, such incubation projects should be welcomed, because I think when students get to do these live experiments or you know get themselves tested on this building robots, it is very good for the nation and also for the students. Thank you so much.
Floors, ground floor and mezzanine space, as well as the first floor. In fact, do we have a, excuse me, you have uploaded the presentation? Can you immediately show that? Yeah, we can go down. I'll show you the presentation. Okay. So that's the museum entrance, and you begin with the Constitution Garden outside there. They're doing? Okay. So you begin with the Constitution Gardens and the entrance to the museum. I'm going to go quickly into the museum itself. So there are lots of outdoor sculptures. I'm going to do it fast so that you get a sense of it. That's outdoor sculpture called We the People of India. Then there's another one on Insaf Ki Devi, Pride of Unity. And then there's a sculpture on Echoes of Liberty, Equality Before Law. Then there's a map of India all through scrap metal. Then there's something called the frame, which is the original constitution document. Then you have various forms of Indian art. We are paying tribute to Sorai art, Bond art, Bill art, Tanjore painting, Kalakari, Patachitra, Madhubani, Pichwa. These are all part of our effort to celebrate the constitutional values. Then you are essentially, I want to tell you about the three things that I said, which is the ground floor of the museum, the mezzanine floor, which is the Maker's Gallery and the Freedom's Journey. Then the ground floor is the comprehensive floor, where we start with art form called Portrait, which is made by State. So there are over 600 people involved in this project. It's a massive effort. That's called the We the People of India. This is art drawn from the preamble of the Constitution of India. Then you have one of the original copies of the Constitution. We actually have one of the original copies of the Constitution. There were some 1,000 copies that were photolithographic copies, and I have one of them. So that is going to be the museum. Valaigara made a pedestal where this original copy will be placed. Then we are paying tribute to Mahatma Gandhi. As you know, Mahatma Gandhi was not a member of the Constitutional Assembly. He was, of course, there when the Assembly was constituted, but he died before the Constitution was adopted. But we are paying tribute to him, obviously because of the fact that his own contribution was a brooding omnipresent in the members' minds when they were drafting the Constitution. All right, then we look at the three important philosophical foundations of the Constitution: individual freedom, economic and social justice, and equality and inclusivity, which form part of Nehru's objective resolution, later became the preamble of the Constitution. Then you have an amazing ceiling sculpture, it's a double-story height building. So you see the ceiling sculpture, and the reflection there is that we are under the protective umbrella of the Constitution. Then you have a hand-painted mural right there as you move through the ceiling sculpture. Then you have a children's corner where we have interactive installations, animation videos, quizzes and puzzles. The idea of the Constitution I mentioned early on is that to make it accessible for people, young people including. So we have all these pamphlets where complex aspects of law are given in simple language. And then we pay tribute to the women of the Constitutional Assembly. There were outstanding members, 15 of them, who made significant contributions, and we are paying tribute to all of them, both inside and outside the museum. Then there is a section on decoding the Constitution, then there's a section on quizzes and games, then there's another section on Constitution demystified, then where you get to understand more provisions of the Constitution. Then there is a section on Constitutional tidbits, where you get to learn about some of the important facts, interesting facts of the Constitution, then some of the quotations from the Constitution members, Supreme Court judgments, landmark cases, and of course amendments to the Constitution. We also pay tribute to the artworks of the Constitution. In fact, if you see the original Constitution, there were so many interesting artworks in it, and we are paying tribute to all of them as well. Then there's another beautiful sculpture by name Genesis by Alex Davis. Then there's another one called Visitor and Pass. Then there's another one called Votus Indica by Megha Joshi. And then another one, Sudipta Das' sculpture called Ascending Descending, which is reflecting the idea of how Constitution was a collective document, how people from different diversities and pluralities were involved in the making of the Constitution. Then there's another beautiful installation called the Wishing Tree of Justice. Sangam Bankare has done it. Then there's another one called Territorial Sublime by Pinaki Mohanty, and then one on fabric called by Rekha Goyal, which is again reflecting of the diversity. Then you have a very interesting installation called Siddharth Gupta's installation known as Illusion. The original was in Lincoln's Memorial, Abraham Lincoln. We are juxtaposing Abraham Lincoln and Dr. Ambedkar, how both of them played very important roles in their respective countries in eliminating or resisting discrimination. Then there's a beautiful painting called Story of Independent India, where we are focusing the entire evolution of the last 75 years. And there's another one called 100 Sentences. I'm going fast because I want to, I'm conscious of your time. Then there's a section on stamps. We've collected stamps of that time. There's a museum shop in the ground floor. Then you have a graffiti on the staircase, and you move to the Maker's Gallery, which is the mezzanine floor. And then there we have an interactive projection wall. Here you get to see the entire evolution and milestones of the constitution making process. Then we have a wall of busts. I mentioned early on that we are paying tribute to every member of the Constitutional Assembly, and that's been never done before. And we made 300 busts of all members of the Constitutional Assembly. Then there's a section on Assembly debate, where you can actually stand and listen to the debate, the speeches, the archival content, as well. Then there's a section on antecedents and influences, how Indian Constitution was shaped by many other constitutions. Can you please switch on these slides? How Indian Constitution was shaped by so many other constitutions and how they influenced the constitution making process. And post 1949, how our constitution inspired other constitutions and other jurisdictions as well. That's the section called antecedents and influences. Then we have a section which is very interesting. We have a hologram of Dr. Ambedkar, where you can actually ask a question to Dr. Ambedkar and he will reply from his original writings. We have taken content from his original writings and he will reply. Are you ready now? Okay.
You see, the Constitution is the fundamental law of a country, which establishes the structure, power, and duties of the government, and defines the basic rights of citizens. The Constitution is not, therefore, a mere lawyer's document.
All right, there's more there. All right, we go to the first floor. That's called the Freedom's Journey. The first floor. The first thing you can do is you can take a selfie and take a member as the oath or the member of the Constituent Assembly. And look at the picture there, right behind Nehru. You can be that person. You can take a picture. Again, to make the entire experience of the museum interesting and engaging, then there's an archival deep dive content, an LED screen. Then you have an entire LED wall where we are facing the 75 years of the Constitution. Then there's a section called Creative Expression inspired by the Constitution, which is including codes. Then you have a section on literature wall, books, articles, publications, vernacular mediums. Then there's a section on fundamental rights. Then there's a place where we pay tribute to our own Chancellor, Mr. Jindal, for the right to fly the national flag wave. There's a section on expert speak where we've recorded conversations from various experts, including lawyers and judges and chief justices, about various topics of the Constitution. Then we are paying tribute to several experts, 50 of them who are no longer alive, but they made immense contributions in the last 75 years. There's a section on perhaps only in India. There's animated video clips on interesting cases that have shaped the Constitution. Then there's a section called a very interesting vintage radio, which essentially focuses on 1920 to 2020. You can choose the year and it'll give you major news items related to the Constitution. There's a section on You Know Right, which is about testing your knowledge of fundamental rights. Then there's an immersive room where we get a 360-degree visual spectacle surrounding the constitutional evolution. Then there is a section called Samvidhan, which is the Sam Benegal's documentary, which we are showing there. And then we have the timeline, which is the entire evolution of the Constitution, post-Constitution, which is the last 75 years. 5 years journey, if you see this, each of the important milestones have been covered. And it's very important to look at this because this is facing all major legislation, constitutional amendments, important judgments by the courts, and other aspects of the last 75 years. Just when you leave, you have a video feedback kiosk where you can give your feedback, and then there's the balcony sculpture just outside. So some of you will be interested in this. For the last 6 months, we are working 24/7. We've been in touch with several important institutions in India and around the world to get archival content. We're also in touch with other institutions for digital databases, again that have been obtained from India and around the world. So it's a massive exercise that is being undertaken as we
you.